Right then, let's have a proper little chinwag about the Pixel 7a and the Pixel 9a, shall we? And work out if it's worth an upgrade in our video, yes, our video series, Upgrade Paths. Before then though, I'm going to level with you for a second. I know you're not subscribed. I know you're not subscribed to the channel, but you watch our videos. I can sense it, and I can sense you like good content, so how about doing me a solid and subbing to the channel right now? I'll leave it up to you, but I don't think you should miss out. Cheers. So Google's Pixel series always seems to spark a little bit of debate. I think we inevitably get that usual mix of excitement and the yeah but kind of phrasing comments. It's almost a tradition at this point in time, and to be fair, the Pixel 8a did have a bit of an identity crisis in a lot of ways. It was a solid phone, no doubt about it, but it was so close to that regular Pixel 8 that you kind of had to wonder who it really was for, and that means it had a bit of a fallow year last year. I think it was difficult to recommend the A series unless you could get a solid discount. I think now that Google's tweaked the formula again with the Pixel 9 and it's changed the A series up quite a bit, I think we should probably break down how the 9a stacks up against the 7a, as it does look like a bit of a better upgrade. You know as well as I do, the first thing that you'll clock is the design. Google's moved away from those softer lines and that bubbly, although the 7a was quite sharp compared to other devices in the lineup. The 9a has a sharper, more angular aesthetic. It's the same design language as the rest of the Pixel 9 family, and personally I reckon some people will actually find it less approachable than the older design. There was something quite comforting about the 7a's design that when I go back to it, I really do like feeling it in the hand. On the flip side, I will say the 7a and the 8a, they now just look a little bit out of place with the camera bar and those curves, rightly or wrongly. I guess it kind of is what it is at this point. It's also interesting to see the phone designs shift, especially in this mid-range area. We don't often see fully flat Android phones these days, so the 9a is, as some of you have put it, a bit of a fresh air in that regard, a bit of breath of fresh air that is. There are barely any bumps or bits sticking out. It's not clear if this design update enables the improved IP68 rating, which is up from the IP67 rating on the Pixel 7a, but it's a first for the A series, and I do think personally it's a big deal, especially for cheap phones. It just means you don't have to baby this phone around quite as much with regards to water and dust resistance. Now here's a slightly odd one. The dimensions have changed for this phone. The Pixel 9a is quite a bit taller, a bit wider, but somehow it's actually lighter than the 7a. Go figure. And that size increase means that Google squeezed in a bigger screen. It's 6.3 inches on the 9a compared to the 6.1 inches on the 7a and the 8a from last year as well. It's not a massive jump, but it's noticeable. Plus the 9a design, or at least the design and display, achieves significantly brighter levels, which makes it a big difference to use in everyday scenarios. Let's just get into the display a little bit deeper here, because while the 9a is definitely superior to the 7a in practically every regards to the display itself, the bezels on that 9a, they're a little bit on the chunky side, I won't lie about that. That doesn't mean that the previous gen had a bad screen. It's still pretty good for the price. It's rated at 90Hz, it's Full HD+, but to be fair, most people will be happy with either phone here, as that 120Hz refresh rate does make a difference. I think the maximum brightness though of around 1000 nits does start to fall apart when you compare it to that 2700 nit potential peak brightness of the 9a. One is just, as I say, objectively better than the other, and for content, for everything that you're going to use it for, the 9a is quite a big step up. When you're using biometric unlocks though, both of these phones use an optical in-display fingerprint scanner. There's no ultrasonic on the 9a. There's face unlock as well, that's software based. Nothing's changed there, so there's no upgrades. They're genuinely reliable, and I do think they're nice additions to any phone, regardless of the price point. So in terms of software differences here, Google's been pushing AI hard over the past couple of years, and that has implications for these two devices. While the core Android experience, to be completely honest with you, it's really, really similar across the 7a and 9a. The newer phone does have some of the latest AI features. Some of them it does miss out on because it doesn't quite have the same competency of the regular 9 series. Whether they'll come to older models, some of the functions that are available out of the box on the 9a, that's another open question. The 9a and 7a launched with different versions of Android as well. That was Android 13 on the 7a and Android 15 on the 9a. They will get, well, they're available with Android 15 now, and the Android 16 will be available in the coming weeks. We do believe that's going to be the case. It'll be interesting to see what potential AI features the 9a will achieve over time, as it will get more of those, while the 7a is likely to get the stable Android 16 update, probably not much else beyond that. At the moment, most of the changes here are going to be down to applications. You can get third-party alternatives that do mimic these, and they will work on the 7a, but for instance, the 9a uses Gemini Nano XXS, which is just a modified version of Google's on-device AI model. That's definitely not present on the 7a, but there are some features that are not available due to having less RAM than the flagship lineups. The good news is, as I say, both phones have promised a solid update slate, if that makes sense. You get 5 years on the Pixel 7a and 7 years, which is a big jump up on the 9a. You'll get 2 more updates on the Pixel 7a, so that'll put you up to, I believe, Android 17, and the 9a will get way into the future. It'll be about Android 23, Android 24, somewhere around that point in time, depending on how Google actually shifts the launch periods that they've had over the past couple of years. So the Pixel 9a has had a proper tune-up, and it does come with better internals and cooling. That's probably the biggest change here. It has that newer G4 chip. The leap from Tensor G2 to G4, I wouldn't say it's exactly substantial, but it's enough to see gains in most areas. The experience, that said, will probably be fairly similar when you're using your phone as the phone, that is. The core specs are still 8GB of RAM, the storage is 128 and 256 on both phones. The 9a, as I say, has that cooler vapor chamber, whatever you want to call it, which should translate into improved sustained performance and better thermal management, which is something that the Tensor G2 does seem to suffer with. Intensive tasks like gaming or video recording probably going to be definitely better. Well, it is definitely going to be better on the 9a. So if you do a lot of that, it's probably important to look to this one. But in terms of the actual experience, it's pretty much similar across the board. Battery life is always a key battleground with any device, and I think that the Pixel series has suffered with this over the past few years in general, especially since that Tensor chip has not been the most efficient. The 9a definitely has a clear edge over the 7a this time around though, and historically, as we know, that the A series has offered really solid battery longevity. That definitely rings true with the Pixel 7a. The 9a though just packs a much larger battery, which translates into significantly longer usage. We're talking substantial increases in capacity as well here, which is always really welcome. To be precise, the 9a has a huge 5100 mAh battery, the biggest on any Pixel to date, and that's a lot bigger than the Pixel 7a's 4385 mAh capacity, so almost a 10% increase. Not quite, but almost. I think it's not just about the size as well, as the 9a does get a boost in wired charging speed, which now supports 23-watt charging via USB-C, which is not the fastest out there. It's just definitely improvement over the Pixel 7a's 18 watts, which is practically ancient at this point in time. Wireless charging, however, just remains the same at 7.5 watts, so there's no increases there, but you can just charge at a pretty slow speed on those devices. Now onto the cameras for a moment, because at least on paper, the 7a does hold its own, and to a great extent, it really does here, because there are some things to think about. There are some nuances we kind of have to discuss. While both phones have similar ultra-wide and selfie setups at 13 megapixels and at 10.5/13 megapixels, I think it's when it comes out of the camera itself, the main sensor is where things start to diverge. The 7a actually has a larger main sensor with that 64 megapixel main one, that Sony IMX787, as it has more megapixels on the board, but the reality is that the 9a's main sensor, which is now at 48 megapixels, does deliver slightly sharper images with improved dynamic range. I don't really know how they're doing this, it's just that Google is offering improved image tuning on this new device. It's also worth noting that both phones offer a variety of similar core camera experiences, especially when it comes to the UI, but the 9a does throw in a few extra software tricks. There is macro focus, which is baked in. You can't turn this on, you just get your phone close to a device, object, whatever it needs to be, and it will switch to macro focus. It also has Add Me, which is it's dual exposure. They're selling it as AI. I don't think it's AI, it's just dual exposure for group photos. It then uses AI to actually piece these two together effectively. They're not necessarily game changers, but I do think these are nice to have features. You would expect photo quality to drop off drastically from the 9a to the 7a, considering it is a 2-year gap between these. However, as I say, the main sensors aren't all that far apart in terms of quality and consistency. I think if you value the camera experience, you're probably going to be happy with both these phones, and it is strange to see Google go for a slightly smaller, substantially smaller sensor on its latest version of the A series. So when we start to lay everything out on the table, where does this leave us? I think if you're currently rocking a 7a, you're wondering, should you rush out and grab a Pixel 9a? Well, I have to say, probably not. As I've said before, the Pixel 9a isn't just a minor refresh though. I think it signals a bit of a shift for the A series. Google seems to be giving that stronger identity of its own rather than just a cheaper version of the flagship Pixel, which did feel like the 7a was that and the 8a after it. I think it's a good thing though that Google does create these divergent lines. The 9a is objectively a better phone than the 7a. It's had 2 years in the oven longer, so it has that way better display, a more powerful chip, and the really big battery included. I will say the camera in some ways is a bit of a downgrade, as I alluded to slightly earlier, but it is still a really good system on a phone at this price point. I think if you have the 7A and it's serving you well, there is no urgent need to switch, which is a really good thing. I think that's one of the best things about this device. If you're coming from an older A series phone, maybe something like the 6A, if you're hanging on to the 4A or even the 5, or you're looking to jump into the Pixel ecosystem, I do genuinely think that the 9A is a compelling option and might be worth your time. But at $500, it probably seems about the right price that it has been for a long time at this stage. Let me know though what you think. Do you think the Pixel 9A is a big upgrade over the 7A? Again, I'm slightly on the fence in some regards. If you have the 7A, again, I don't think you should upgrade. I think you probably wait another year, especially as you have those extra 2 years of Android updates to kind of keep you satiated, as it were, for a little while longer. Let me know what you think down in the comment sections below. Hopefully this has helped you out, helped you make that decision. This has been our upgrade paths for the 7A to the 9A. Yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you later.